Welcome on into Forward Progress, the first edition of the off-season moves. I'm Eric Polley from the Gold Sheet, joined by Rob Pizzola of the Hammer and Betstamp, Eric Eager of Sumer Sports, and professional sports bettor Hitman. Like I said earlier, we're going to start talking about what has been going down in free agency, discuss some futures, as well as a mock draft from NFL Network's Daniel Jeremiah. Before we hop on in, I want to remind everybody, push that like button, subscribe to the show, and if you want to comment, we will discuss some of your comments. We have to be subscribed to do so. And also, we have to shout out the sponsor, Pinnacle. I want to remind everybody that Pinnacle is the world's sharpest sports book, offering competitive odds for 25 years. The Hammer and Betstamp all about line shopping on this channel. And with everyday competitive odds, Pinnacle should be one of your outs. If you want to support the show, use code HAMMER when signing up to Pinnacle, your trusted sportsbook for 25 years. Bet smart, bet Pinnacle, must be 19 or older in Ontario. Please play responsibly, not available in the United States. All right, gentlemen, let's get to the main attraction here. Let's talk some of the recent moves in free agency. Some of the bigger things that have happened right now are Mike Williams went to go visit the New York Jets, and he signed with the New York Jets, 1 year, $15 million extension. Chase Young signed to the New Orleans Saints, but he's actually going to have some surgery, but apparently New Orleans was okay with that. And the Cleveland Browns continue to do a little bit of zigging while everybody zags. They like to trade for these receivers, and now they give Jerry Jeudy a big extension. So, Rob, I'll start on over with you. Tell me about what you think of some of these moves, how impactful they are, and if you think that these are things to really monitor, or if these are something that, sounds better on paper than might be in reality.
Yeah, I think with all these moves in free agency, it's sort of like the cumulative effect of what these teams are doing in the offseason that's going to be impactful, right? That's not to say Mike Williams, Chase Young are not impactful players on their own, but they're not moving a point spread themselves. I do like the Mike Williams addition quite a bit for the New York Jets. They solidified the O-line a little bit. They brought in Tyron Smith, and now they kind of have like that other weapon on the outside. They can move Garrett Wilson into the slot. Alan Lazard's not going anywhere because Aaron Rodgers seems to like love Alan Lazard and that. So that's going to happen. The other two that you mentioned are a little bit more, I don't want to say, I'm a little more skeptical about that. The Chase Young thing is kind of absurd because they signed him to a 1-year deal. He's going to have some sort of issue going into the year and getting that, fixed in the offseason here. But per my understanding, and maybe Eric Eager can, dive into this a little bit more, but it seems like it's guaranteed money for them. The Saints aren't in like the best cap situation. So I totally understand wanting to give Chase Young a 1-year deal after watching him basically mail it in down the stretch last year. I would never lock that guy up long-term, but they give him this guaranteed money. He's dealing with injury. They're up against it in terms of a cap crunch. So that doesn't make a lot of sense. The Jerry Jeudy one for me is the toss-up move because Jerry Jeudy has a impeccable ability to get open, but he can't catch the ball. Mm-hmm. And at some point or another, you wonder if that's going to reverse itself. I can just in my head can picture 3 times where Jerry Jeudy's wide open last year and he doesn't see the ball. He drops it. These are like big plays. So I like it in principle for Cleveland, but it's a little bit of a risk. And you're counting on that guy to eventually find his hands and eventually be able to make those plays. So that one to me is very boomer bust because I think Jeudy has a lot of assets to be a great NFL receiver, but whether or not he can put together the most important aspect of it, which is catching the ball, that remains to be seen. So interesting moves. I like Mike Williams quite a bit for the Jets. I can be sold on the Jeudy situation. I don't really get Chase Young for the Saints other than it addresses a need for them, which is pass rush. But the whole contract that goes along with that is just really weird to me.
Yeah, it seems like it is Chase Young's kind of last stand there, a prove-it deal for him, coming off a neck injury, not so great. But Eric, do you have any more information kind of on like your thoughts on those moves? Because obviously there's some cap implications there, and just give us your thoughts on the situations of those 3 signings.
Yeah, it's funny because I think you're going to see it's almost the exact same deal that a former Saints edge player, Marcus Davenport, got from the Vikings. And when you see 1 year, $13 million, you're like, geez, that's a lot to pay in 1 year. But what the Vikings did with Davenport was they actually cut it between 1 year and then what's called a void year, which is essentially you're stashing the guaranteed money in the next year. So the Vikings essentially paid Davenport for $6.5 million for last year for nothing. and then $6.5 million the following year when his contract voided. I think that's essentially what the Saints are going to do. So basically, like, pay it out in a bonus, and then basically pay for it over the course of the next 5 years, which again just exacerbates the Saints' problem, which is that they're constantly paying for players who sucked ass for them for the last 5 years, and that's going to be their issue. I think with respect to Jeudy, Rob's right. Like, when you look at things like perception, and everything like that, Jeudy is pretty good at getting open against man, and man cover. Getting open against man is very repeatable. 70% success rate in doing that. What's really interesting is he's not very good at getting open against zone. He's 5th percentile player there over the course of his career, per Matt Harmon's research, but that's a very unstable thing. The question is if he can go to Cleveland and get open against zone coverage, is now you have a pretty good wide receiving core in Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, him, David Njoku, who emerged a season ago. The question always becomes then, can the quarterback actually take advantage of it? Because Judy's biggest issue, drops have not, Rob remembers, Terrell Owens had years in Dallas where he had 18 drops, and he still had 1,200 to 1,400 to 1,600 receiving yards. The drops aren't the issue if you have production. He just didn't have production in Denver. Can the quarterback in Cleveland actually get him that production? Because in Denver, the quarterbacks could not get him the production, and then the drops exacerbated his issues. Mike Williams in New York, to answer the last question, this is a signing that is tailor-made for the Jets because Aaron Rodgers, he's a different quarterback than, say, Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes doesn't really have the time or the patience to throw the back shoulder fades to guys who don't get open. Rodgers has made a career out of that. And so this is a tailor-made situation for Mike Williams off of an injury. I kind of like this signing. And to me, it's a very good one for New York.
Eric, to jump in really quickly, the one comp that I always think of in regards to Jerry Jeudy was actually Devontae Adams' early career as well.
Yes.
With Green Bay, where he was constantly open. They were getting him the ball consistently, and he just couldn't catch it. But eventually he figured that out. And obviously, I'm not saying Jerry Jeudy's going to be Devontae Adams, but that's the comp that I have off the top of my head is early career, lots of separation, just couldn't put the ball in. So I understand the 3-year deal. They're betting on his upside. I just, you're betting on his upside. You're not betting on where he's at right now.
Well, and this is where Cleveland, when you think about, and granted, this is a lot for a contract, but it's different. And this is where Cleveland is a sharp organization, I think, relative to a lot. It's a lot to give up a second or a first for him. And then this contract, it's obviously, they did the same thing with Amari Cooper, though. They gave up a 5th round pick, and everybody's like, oh, a 5th. Well, they gave up the 5th for Amari Cooper and then paid him the $20 million a year. That was what Dallas was. Dallas got only the 5th, but then the $20 million in cap space back per year. Giving him this contract in the open market probably would have been fine. The top 17 receivers, now it's 18. The top 18 receivers in the NFL, APY, none of them have ever been available in the free agency market. If you want to get a blue chip player at this position, you have to pay up via a trade, or you have to draft the guy yourselves. And Cleveland is just doing it. They're just paying they're just doing the price of business here. And for Jeudy, it's kind of alarming. But to Rob's point, a lot of these guys do take the time to develop.
No, those are all very great points. The Cleveland Browns, again, trying to zigging while everyone else is zagging. They see the value in just trading and getting their guy. If they're not going to be able to draft him, you have to acquire him some other type of way, and they're going about it in the trade market. Hitman, you have any thoughts on these 3 moves, how they'll impact anything?
There was 2 moves I liked and 1 I disliked. The 2 that I liked that we touched on, I actually liked the Chase Young one, especially after on Twitter today, I got to see that they said that I think he has $8 million of that $13 million is based off in playing in the games bonuses, which is one of the most incentive heavy just to play actual games contracts that there is in the league. So this is a player that does have an injury history, and there's some actual motivation for Chase Young to actually perform this year. 1 is that he's on a 1-year deal where he's going to want to get a contract next year. But 2, if he's not performing, then they could deactivate him and save a lot of money because of these bonuses that they have for him just to be active for the Saints. So I thought that it was a low risk, high upside move for a team that does need a lot of defensive line help. I know Rob said earlier, like, a lot of these moves don't affect the point spread, and he's right. But maybe we could say, just considering who Mike Williams' backup was slated to be, that maybe he's worth like a half point or something just in this specific situation, that you're going from arguably the worst starting wide receiver in the NFL and Alan Lazard. Maybe not even arguably. I think he might. I can't even think of one off the top of my head. That would be a worse starting perimeter wide receiver right now. And you add Mike Williams. So I thought that it was another good high upside signing for the Jets. It's 1 year for them, so they're not going to be stuck with the contract in future years if Aaron Rodgers leaves after this year and they have to rebuild or something. So I thought that was a good move. The Jeudy trade, the compensation was fine to give a 5th and a 6th round pick, but I just thought that paying $43 million guaranteed to a player that has shown flashes, but it's been 4 years now, and he has shown a lot. There's been a lot left to desire with him. And I know Eric touched on Matt Harmon earlier. I know Matt Harmon's been saying for like 2 years that, like, this is a guy that he's more name than game at this point, and maybe he does develop into more game in his another shot with the Browns. But I mean, this is a guy that's going to be at best your third weapon in the passing game behind Amari Cooper and David Njoku, and a team that still is very committed to the run game as well. So I just don't know if he ends up putting together the numbers that would match this type of contract, getting $43 million guaranteed. I thought that it was a good low risk flyer with the draft picks, but now the contract on top of it, I wasn't a huge fan of personally.
No, and it's very fair to be questionable. To kind of be a little bit, on the fence of this decision, because, like you mentioned, the production isn't there, and at this point, Jerry Jeudy seems to be more name than game. So totally got that there. We're a week into free agency now, though, so let us know what other moves you guys really liked, and maybe at the end we could touch on a couple of them. And also a reminder to click that like button. But now let's talk about some of the bigger moves that went on, and we got to start in Pittsburgh. First things first, they go and get Russell Wilson on a 1 year, $1.2 million deal. Of course, Wilson was cut by the Denver Broncos. And then they still got active and went after Justin Fields for a 6th round pick. And they still have him on his rookie deal. And now they have the rights to also pick up that 5th year option, if I'm not mistaken. So whichever one of you want to start off here, because there's a lot to dissect, we'll then go into the Bears and their perspective after. But let's start with, how do we feel about the Pittsburgh Steelers basically getting rid of Kenny Pickett, bringing these two guys in? Do we have a QB competition on our hands, or what do we make of the Steelers' move to get both of these guys this offseason?
I think that this is like really interesting in the sense that I don't like the Russell Wilson move at all for Pittsburgh, but I thought the 6th round pick for Justin Fields, you're highly unlikely to find a quarterback in the 6th round that's going to give you as much production or potential as Justin Fields, right? What's just really weird to me is they come out immediately after the trade and it's like, Russell Wilson will be our starter for next year. It's like, why even really acquire Fields at that point? Like, you're acquiring him for the upside. You might as well let him play through it. For me, Russell Wilson is cooked. And the reason I say that is because I have so much respect for Sean Payton as a head coach. I think he's one of the best head coaches in the game. For him to recognize that, like, we need to pivot here, and we're going to completely transform this offense after a month of the season to having Wilson just throw underneath and go for all these yards after the catch and run the ball a little bit more. Like, it was a very safe, conservative, I'll call it flaccid offense for the Broncos last year. That's a sign to me that one of the best offensive minds in the history of the NFL just does not trust this guy anymore. So I don't like Russell Wilson. I don't think he's going to find something in Pittsburgh. Arthur Smith is there now. They're going to run the ball a lot. They'll ask Wilson to do the same stuff he did in Denver. I just don't think that that's a successful formula for them. I do think we'll see Fields fairly early into the season, or maybe midway through the season. And I honestly think that there's potential for him in an Arthur Smith offense. I really do. I'm not the biggest Justin Fields fan. I think he lacks a lot of anticipation with his throws. He kind of waits for his receivers to get open before he gets the ball out of his hands. But with a little bit of coaching, different system, I think the potential is there. So I love that move for the Steelers. I just don't really get why they also have the Russell Wilson. Well, Russell Wilson move was first, but choose to start Wilson going into the year. That just seems a little bit weird to me overall.
Totally agree. Eric or Hitman, thoughts?
Yeah, this is one where, Arthur Smith really cut his teeth in Tennessee in 19 and 20. 19, Marcus Mariota was put on the bench. Ryan Tannehill came in, made the Pro Bowl, led the NFL in yards per pass attempt. Ryan Tannehill that year, his pressure to sack ratio per PFF was 28.6%. He was able to generate good offense with a quarterback who was very limited in the exact same ways that Justin Fields is limited. Justin Fields is not inaccurate. Coming out of college, he had some of the best accuracy metrics per PFF and all. His pocket presence is terrible. He does not know how to avoid sacks. He does not know how to get rid of the football on time. And we all think Arthur Smith is a boob because of his time in Atlanta, but his time in Tennessee, he was very good with an offense that had a quarterback that's a lot like Justin Fields. And, Russell Wilson has a lot of the same characteristics as well, but Russell Wilson refuses to throw over the middle of the field. A lot of the same stuff that, he's going to need to have success with. So I agree with Rob. I think Fields, the tricky thing is, and the reason that Fields only went for a conditional sixth is the risk is two-dimensional. Like if Fields succeeds here, but he's not Jordan Love or better, the decision gets really difficult because you might be in a Daniel Jones situation, and good luck with that. Yeah. That's the hard part. But I think vis-a-vis this year, he can really be successful because he has a good arm. He can go down the field. And one of the reasons he was not going to work in Chicago as a bridge, which on its own in a vacuum would have been the best decision for the Bears, is that players like him. And so it would have been a problem. Now he goes here with no one sitting over his shoulder. Players are going to gravitate towards Justin Fields. And I do think you combine that with Tomlin, I do think that this is going to be a good thing for the Pittsburgh Steelers with respect to 2024 season in a vacuum.
No, it makes sense. Mike Tomlin, of course, one of the better coaches, if not the best, at getting the most out of his rosters and obviously never having a losing season. Hitman, are you viewing this similarly where you think Justin Fields could be set up for some relative success in Pittsburgh, or how are you viewing this one?
Yeah, I mean, when the trade happened, my first thought was try to find there's some season-long player stats that are out right now. I was trying to find a Russell Wilson under and because it's just not going to surprise me at all when Justin Fields is starting at some point this year, especially with the direction that the Steelers have went in offensively this offseason. It's very apparent that they might even get more run heavy than they've been in previous years. And this has been a team that's been one of the run heaviest teams in the league. And right now, I mean, who is the Steelers' number 2 wide receiver? Is it Calvin Austin right now?
He would be definitely top 3 for them. Van Jefferson, I think, would be the 2.
Yeah, Van Jefferson, exactly. So they have one. They have one wide receiver right now, and George Pickens. So it's kind of like it feels like the Steelers' offense is kind of taking the identity of this old Falcons offense. You have one wide receiver, Drake London, George Pickens. You have the tight end, Freiermuth, Kyle Pitts, who's both of them not great blockers, really. And then you're going to have a lot of 2-3 tight end sets, a lot of running the ball. And it feels like this could be an offense that we just see Justin Fields come in midseason and they run the absolute heck out of him on read options. They run the absolute heck out of the ball. So that was my first thought when thinking about this was I would probably bet against Russell Wilson making it towards the end of the year.
Yeah, and it's very fair to see why. And if you have a opportunity to get a season long under, betting on Russell Wilson. I think I saw it, man. Correct me if I'm wrong. Was that like 3,200 yards or something like that? Right?
Yeah. It was in that ballpark, but it's gone now, and I don't know if we're getting it back.
Don't know. Getting it back.
He could have played a full season in the under; would have still been in play at big time. Probably an edge at that number.
Yeah, certainly, but let's flip the script here and let's look at it from the Bears' perspective. Okay, so now I don't think I've seen a lot of more discourse on any form of Twitter than people from Chicago going crazy about what happened with Justin Fields. They wanted to keep him. Then now they're demoralized, went for a 6th-round pick. But then Chicago, they've been busy all free agency period, and to cap it off with the big signing of Keenan Allen. They also traded for Keenan Allen. Also signed Gerald Everett, DeAndre Swift, which was like the first move of free agency, which was a little, puzzling, but I guess now it's beginning to make a little bit more sense because of the moves they made. Add some depth in the OL. Also had the number 9 overall pick. Is Caleb Williams being set up to have probably one of the best situations for a number 1 overall pick, like at least in recent memory, if not potentially ever?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the plan here, right? I mean, the Bears are sneaky, could be sneaky good if Williams could realize his potential in the first year, right? Because you have your top 2 receiving options now. I don't like the DeAndre Swift signing in terms of what they paid for him or whatever, and coming off of the O-line that he had, we've seen this happen before, right? Miles Sanders rings a bell in the same situation, but the weapons are there offensively for the Chicago Bears. The defense in the latter half of the year last year, and I know Caleb Williams plays the offensive side of the ball, but when Jalen Johnson, their cornerback room, if you look at weeks, probably was around 6 to 10 last year, was decimated. They were on cornerbacks 5, 6, and 7 at one point in the year. They finally got healthy, and all of a sudden that defense just transformed. They brought in Montez Sweat on the defensive line. I mean, they're good on the back end with Kevin Byard there as well, and Brisker at safety. It's a sneaky, talented roster. You'd like to see them better maybe at the offensive tackle position, but it's not a weak line by any stretch of the imagination. So I think if you bring in a quarterback like Caleb Williams, who they're very likely going to draft first overall based off the betting markets, and he realizes his potential right away, the Bears could be what the Texans were last year, really, in my opinion, where they're very sneaky good, competitive in a lot of games. A lot has to go right. They have to stay healthy. But overall, I like the offseason for the Bears because you're going to want to put your number 1 pick in a position to succeed right away.
Absolutely. Eric or Hitman, anything to add there?
Yeah, they've done about as good of a job as you can at rebuilding and using the draft, using the cap space as you can. I think a lot of people, and I like Seth Walder, for example, of ESPN, but a lot of the analytical group think is you can't send a 2nd-round pick and pay up for Montez Sweat. And it's well, what are you going to do with that cap space then? Because you're going to have to pay 31-year-old Donnell Hunter then, or you're going to have to pay Von Miller 2 years ago then. And we all saw what that happened. The fact is in a lot of cases, the best outcome is to use your draft space, your draft picks, to build a great roster. Well, they didn't do that under Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy. So the next thing is to use the space that you have, because none of your picks ever hit, to build a roster. So they traded the first pick and they got DJ Moore, a premium position player that they know is good. They used it to get Montez Sweat into the building. And so now they have on both sides of the ball, premium position players. They get Keenan Allen there. And to Rob's point, Tyreek Stevenson, Jaquan Brisker, Kyler Gordon, now Jalen Johnson. They got 2 linebackers, again, non-premium position players that they actually used the space on last year. They actually have real football players on that team now. It's all amounts now to the coaching and to Caleb Williams, which that took a team that needed 10 degrees of freedom to be good, now down to 2. I like that bet now. And it's a tough division, but it's an easy conference. So I kind of like them right now.
Yeah, very hard to see to not at this point. And also considering they have the number 9 pick in the draft as well. So they have a plethora of options there. But Hitman, what do you want to add here?
Yeah, the roster is very solid right now. The defense was top 10 in most major metrics towards the back half of last season. And the offense is obviously, I would presume we're going to say Caleb Williams is a clear upgrade to Justin Fields even in year 1. And you upgrade with Keenan Allen coming in for Darnell Mooney. It's a team that's got guys. It's just that there is question marks with the 2 most important pieces of a team, which is quarterback. There's just a question mark on how is Caleb Williams in year 1. And the coaching staff still I have questions about. with Matt Eberflus, Shane Waldron as the offensive coordinator. I'm not saying I dislike him, but I still have a lot of questions. So there's uncertainty, but the roster building that they have done, they've surrounded themselves, or at least they've surrounded a number one draft pick, a first overall pick, with one of the best situations to come into that I can remember in recent memory, where usually that quarterback's going into an absolute dumpster fire of a situation like Bryce Young just as recently as last year with the Carolina Panthers. But this is a really good situation for one of the best prospects we've seen over the last decade to come into.
Yeah, no, certainly. And then the apprehension for because Matt Eberflus, they were calling for his head by week 5, but like Rob and Eric mentioned earlier, if you really looked at the Bears, they were depleted defensively. Injuries were piling up. Then they got healthy. They went on a little bit of a run. Eberflus kept his job, and now he's going to be in charge of this Caleb Williams-led Chicago Bears team that has a ton of pieces in a winnable conference and is setting up Caleb Williams for massive loads of success. But let's talk about another NFC team that is big on the quarterback. Now, Eric, I've been told that you have an interesting perspective on this, but Kirk Cousins, off the Achilles injury, 4 years, $180 million to the Atlanta Falcons. Kirk Cousins has to be in the Hall of Fame of the getting that money category because he does not leave a penny on the table. But Eric, start us off. What are your thoughts on this deal? You like it for an older guy coming off an Achilles, which is obviously a little bit contradictory there, or what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, and he left the Vikings a $28.5 million dead cap hit, like door hitting them on the ass on the way out type of one final, bleep you. But yeah, I mean, look, the Falcons haven't won more than 7 games since 2017. Kirk Cousins is like the quintessential guy to get you that 8th win. Mm-hmm. The question I have, so I like the move for Minnesota because we just talked about the Bears. The Bears are the 3rd best team in that division. It's going to take an actual team building effort to win that division, the NFC North. To win the NFC South, you just need to get out of bed and build a halfway decent roster. Tampa Bay wasn't even trying last year and won that division. And so I like what the Falcons are doing. And to me, the only thing that I worry about is, does this take them out of the conversation? Let's say if JJ McCarthy falls to 8, or let's say that they're sitting there at round 2 and Penix or Nix falls to them. I still think that they got to think about their quarterback of the future because, Cousins, to all your points, is he was playing good football last year, but he's still going to be 36 when the season comes, or 37. And off an Achilles, he's not all that physically gifted to begin with. But I like, and Hitman's going to talk about the props, but I like Pitt's props. I like Bijan Robinson catch props. I like all kinds of stuff because Kirk Cousins, he when Kirk Cousins found out what went into that PFF grading formula, man, that guy knew that's going to make me some money. And so he's going to check that thing down to Pitts, Robinson, Algier. Those guys are going to get a lot of catches here. I think it's going to be a little bit worse for London, although I mean, he pumped up Justin Jefferson to 10 yards a target for the last 4 years collectively. So I think it's good for the entirety of the Atlanta Falcons team. And they have a better offensive line than the Vikings have ever had. So it's about as good of a situation for Cousins. Team success, you can't get me to buy into a Kirk Cousins team, but you can get me to buy into a Kirk Cousins offense.
Yeah, Hitman, do you have any props in your eyes? Is it as simple as the big targets start looking at some overs, or are you looking more on the running backs in the market there potentially to be a target for this upcoming season?
Well, on a lot of season-long props, I tend to play. I have to really like something for me to bet overs on guys, just because so many risks, injuries, lack of production, benching, anything could happen. But yeah, I think that probably Bijan Robinson is one, as Eric said, one of the biggest beneficiaries because he's a really good receiver. And Kirk Cousins he's going to be a guy that's going to go to his first read, second read. If it's not there, he's checking down. Mm-hmm. And Robinson was an excellent receiver at Texas as well. I do think that the Falcons might be a little bit overvalued, especially looking in the Super Bowl market. I see the most recent odds that we went over was Philly and Dallas are 17-1, Green Bay is 19-1, and Atlanta is 22-1. I think that's correct. I think there's a bigger gap between those teams than especially Dallas and Philly from Atlanta, to where it's 17-1 to 22-1. It's just not a big enough difference. The difference between those two teams is more significant than that difference in the Super Bowl odds. So I think Atlanta, if anything, could be overvalued. I mean, I think Eric said on another Forward Progress podcast, he said something like, if Atlanta has a lot of losing years in a row, like there's a winnable division, you made this move to maybe get a quarterback that gets you to 9-8 and first or second round playoff exit. And that's probably the formula that it's looking like with Atlanta right now. I just don't see as much of a ceiling as I see with some of the other teams in the NFC that are priced compared to Atlanta in the Super Bowl in the futures markets.
Yeah. No. Jason, I think we probably bring up that graphic that we have courtesy of, I don't want to butcher his name, but Robbie NFL on Twitter. It's actually a good segue into what we've just been talking about, because now the Atlanta Falcons, a 1.26% change in Super Bowl odds post the signing of Kirk Cousins, rounding out the top five, the Chiefs, the Eagles, the Cowboys, and the Packers based on these moves. But I guess one of the things to take away, and again, whoever has the first opinion here can just chime right in, but this is just really telling about, unless you're talking about quarterback change, you have obviously Atlanta increasing at the most, and then Minnesota losing Cousins, decreasing at the second highest change. Free agency, at least this first period, is not impacting these future odds really whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of people that are betting futures right now, right? It's low limit stuff. It's not like the most accurate representation of what the market's going to think closer to the season. You know, with Atlanta, right? A lot of this is just their path as well, like Eric was talking about, right? It's Dallas and Philadelphia are better than the Atlanta Falcons, but they are playing in the same division with two teams that have improved over the offseason, whereas you have Atlanta, who's, I mean, Carolina, you just basically throw them out the window going into the year. Who knows what Tampa is going to do with year two of Baker Mayfield? The Saints, I mean, coaching staff is deplorable. You have the most average quarterback there. So that's all priced into that. I personally would I could see myself leading into next year having some alternate win total unders on Atlanta. Mm-hmm. Kirk Cousins, his age with the Achilles injury, if this was any other position in football, we have a lot of data that shows us the effect of the Achilles injury on other players. And typically speaking, there's a substantial drop off. I like Kirk Cousins. He's a good dude. He's going to work his ass off to be ready to go. But his age and that injury is really working against him. Taylor Heineke's still there, but he's not going to get the job done. So that's the way I'd be looking to play it. I mean, Jason, if we can bring up that graphic one more time, how are Houston Super Bowl odds dropping? How are they getting?
Houston and Jacksonville? Did somebody pump up the Tennessee Titans or something because they got Calvin Ridley or Kenneth Murray? What are we doing here?
I mean, Houston arguably had the best offseason of any team. I think
Houston's going to be playing in the AFC Championship game this year. What are we talking about?
I think that one is pretty far off. I also don't think – I think people are ripping Miami's offseason quite a bit right now. I actually don't think it was all that bad for them. I mean, they lost a lot of players, but they filled some needs. I like Jordan Brooks for them. They get the 1-year deal with Shaq Barrett. They have Jordan Poyer there. They lost Xavier Howard. He didn't really do much. I think people are really overreacting to the Miami offseason as well.
But also sharp bettors, sharp bettors already baked in the chances that Kirk was going to Atlanta. Kirk's wife is from here. His kids were enrolled in my kids' schools a month ago. These things were not surprises. That's also why the draft doesn't change odds at all, because we all have the mocks months in advance. These things shouldn't change the odds because they don't. We have expectations built in. These things shouldn't surprise us very much, right? So that's where I'm surprised by. Did people expect Houston to do better than this? They got Danielle Hunter, they got Joe Mixon, they got Azeez El-Shire, who's a phenomenal linebacker. Has everybody watched all my prop bets on the freaking show? No, what are we doing here? I don't get it.
And remember something too. Houston, by all accounts, was in the Keenan Allen sweepstakes. Like, they might not be done adding. Like, it feels like Houston is recognizing that this is our window with our superstar quarterback in his second year. He's on the rookie contract. Let's add guys. So you never know. Like, if they there could be more moves coming for Houston. So I think I agree that I thought the arrow was going to be up on them when we had the graphic, it said the arrow was down. It didn't make a ton of sense to me either.
I mean, I thought it would be up more than any team. Like, Danielle Hunter's such a great ad on the opposite side of Will Anderson. I mean, Al-Shaair, as you meant, like, he played under D'Amico Ryans, is very, like, a lot of familiarity there as well. I think that Houston is a very complete team right now. I'm still not sold on Ryans as a head coach. I think he's more of a defensive mind than an overall head coach. But Bobby Slowick remains there. Like, there's a lot of stuff to love.
Coordinator.
Exactly.
You mentioned Baker Mayfield in Tampa. The thing about Baker Mayfield is he lost his offensive coordinator again, which is like the number one ingredient for him sucking every time. It's the bump, and then the guy gets a coach job because it's hard to coach Baker Mayfield into good play, and then Baker sucks because the second guy always comes in and struggles. Bobby Slowick stays, Ben Johnson stays. Those are two of the biggest moves of the offseason that should buoy these teams.
Totally. I saw someone in the comments mention the Dolphins O-line. I thought Aaron Brewer was a sneaky good signing for them at center as well. Like, it's not the greatest O-line, and certainly they'd want to have like, people forget how good Miami was last year until, like, the wheels fell off with injuries again. Like, this was the team, one of the teams to beat. They were in the Super Bowl conversation, and now all of a sudden they're completely dismissed. I'm not a Tua fan. Don't get me wrong. The O-line could be better. Certainly good coaching staff, lots of great skill position players. They play football in the modern way. I thought they made some sneaky good signings in the offseason as well to replace some players that they lost. I think the Dolphins are going to be in the mix again this upcoming year. Oh, Kendall Fuller as well, which I completely forgot about. That was a great ad for them.
It is a team that has little depth, though, where, like, even if you look at, like, their pass catchers right now, like, it's Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and Braxton Berrios and Jonnu Smith as the starting tight end and the third wide receiver. On the offensive line, Teron Armstead has always been such a big piece where if he gets hurt, the offensive line probably is going to be in some trouble. Defensively, a lot of cap space went to a guy like Jalen Ramsey, where a lot of moving pieces now on defense. So I do think that Miami might be a team kind of similar to the Rams from a few years ago, where they have a bunch of star players, everything. But if they do suffer some injuries, like any team suffers injuries, you're going to be worse. But Miami, especially if they suffer injuries, a little bit less depth than some other teams, more reliant on superstar players.
Yeah, some teams are built better to sustain key injuries. They kind of remind me a little bit of the Bengals, honestly. For years under Joe Burrow with the Bengals, they haven't had much depth on the defensive side of the ball, and they found a way to make it work but they've also benefited from, like, not having until Joe Burrow went down, obviously, some substantial injuries. So, yeah, I mean, that's a valid point. The starting wise, I think that they stack up well, but if you get deep into some certain positions, then the wheels could come off.
Yeah, and that's just the NFL, as we know it, the nature of the sport of football. Obviously, trying to have some depth is going to be crucial to your success because injuries are inevitable. But let's finish up here with a look at Daniel Jeremiah's recent mock draft, his 3.0. He's getting a little bit crazy with some of the trades he's got going on in the first round. Whether or not these are going to transpire, we'll find out in a week from now. But I'll do a quick run through of what's going on in the top 10. Caleb Williams to Chicago. I feel like we can, just lock that in. Washington Commanders, they have a choice now between Drake May and Jaden Daniels. Now, at this point, the odds have shifted a little bit toward Jaden Daniels. Jeremiah has May going too, but he admits that he doesn't really know what's going on. But then the first big splash of his mock draft is the Arizona Cardinals trading back with the Vikings trading up to get J.J. McCarthy. Is JJ McCarthy that guy?
I don't know that I like Daniel Jeremiah. For many years, honestly, the mocks that he's put out have influenced betting markets. I think he's very candid in this one that he doesn't know in a lot of these situations. I don't know if it's clickbait or whatever. There's a million trades in this mock draft. Yeah. I don't know that the Vikings have to trade up to 4 to acquire JJ McCarthy for 1, right? Like, I still believe the Vikings will be in the mix for the 3 pick with New England and try to put together a massive package. If Drake May is available at 3, they could end up with McCarthy. I just don't know that they have to move to 4. Like, who are they really competing against at this point? I'm not sure. Maybe, Eric, you have a little bit more insight as to what's going on there, but I don't know. Betting markets will tell you Jaden Daniels is going to. So I think probably you'll see Jeremiah over the course of time adjust that if he doesn't have any information. The move up to 4 is a little bit surprising for me for Minnesota to get JJ McCarthy. It's not, I don't know anything about JJ McCarthy. I'm not talking about whether he's going to be a great pro, just based off of where he stands on big boards and what the teams ahead of him will be ahead of Minnesota will be doing. I don't see the upside there.
Yeah, it's weird because McCarthy, like, to me, their signal in what your college team asks you to do. And we've known this forever for receivers, right? Like McCole Hardman had all the speed and all the athleticism and all the tools, and Georgia didn't throw him the ball. Like their signal in that. Quarterbacks are interesting because most of these quarterbacks that play for teams, the team asked Patrick Mahomes to throw 70 times. And we rarely have a situation where a guy is kind of a game manager for a great team the way JJ McCarthy is. And he does have some really good, like, 3rd and 4th down statistics. He has some really good efficiency stuff. But when it was nut cutting time, it was Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum that did all the work for Michigan. So I think that has some signal. So I'm not all that high on McCarthy. I do think that the move that the Vikings made to get to 23 with Houston is an optionality move, because I do not believe that it is a lock that New England takes a quarterback at 3. And here's why. Josh Uche's signing, I think, is a signal to the league that New England is worse than even we imagined last year. We were talking about New England and unders and everything. That offense was garbage. But that defense, other than Christian Barmore and the safety, Duggar, they didn't have very good players, but they were awesome last year. And I think a lot of that was because of the coaching of Belichick and Belichick's son and some of those assistants making it better than the sum of the parts. I think with those guys gone, that team roster wise is much, much, much worse than even their record and their efficiency statistics would suggest. And so I think that the Vikings could even get to 3. And so they're at 23 because 23 and 11 in the Jimmy Johnson chart gets to 4, and they just have to add a little bit of a rounding error to get to 3. And so I think that they, instead of doing what the Niners did in 2021 and the Jets did in 2018 and moving up to the spot that they want early, I think that they're leaving themselves optionality to get to the pick because I think they want Drake May. I don't think that they want JJ McCarthy. And I think that they're waiting for the Patriots to come to their senses and actually have, go up and get the quarterback they really want, which is Drake May. But the problem is I don't think Drake May is a lock to fall to 3 the way that the betting markets believe. I don't think that the Marcus Mariota signing, I don't think that look, Joe Flacco is the backup quarterback to Anthony Richardson. There is not a ton of signal in this type of quarterback being a backup to that type of quarterback. So to me, after 1, there's a ton of uncertainty. And so this is all me just saying, don't lay negative prices with any of these picks after pick 1.
No, totally. Eric, Hitman or Rob, any thoughts on JJ McCarthy, what you expect from Washington or New England to do in the 2 and 3 picks right there?
I'll just say, regarding the Jeremiah mock, the guy literally tweeted, I'm going to embrace chaos with this mock draft.
He sure did. He leaned into it.
If you look at his podcast, he was saying, he was basically saying he was having fun with this. We're 5 weeks out. The Jeremiah final mock draft is very important. Listening to some of his podcasts, his television shows on NFL Network, where there'll be a lot. He'll sometimes give information about what he heard about a medical or something like that. That stuff is worth listening to. You can make money off of, but a mock draft 5 weeks out, just pay more attention to the final mock draft and pay more attention to content and everything than paying attention to that. To me, I mean, I read the mock draft. I listened to the podcast. There wasn't anything that I heard or read that I was like, oh my God, I'm going to have to bet this. Like, I just kept it in the back of my mind and that's it. So I think that a lot of this is just being overblown, to be honest.
Yeah, I see a lot of mocks. It's not just Jeremiah now, but there's been a trend over the last week of mocks having 4 QBs in the top 4 picks. That's kind of been the thing now that's like that we're trending towards. I don't think that's going to happen. I actually think JJ McCarthy personally, based off of just like historicals, where he is on big boards and whatever, is more likely to drop than a team move up to get him. Like more of a Will Levis situation than I think a team moving into the top 5 to get him. Like there's some insane talent at receiver in the top 10 this year. I don't think we're going 4 QBs to start. I honestly don't. And I agree with Eric that I don't think it's a certainty that New England would take a QB at 3 as well. So lots of time to go through it. This naturally happens pretty much every year where teams need a quarterback, so they get linked with a guy and then they just get mocked to that team exclusively. But it just doesn't work out that way a lot of times. Like certain teams that are linked to guys, they don't want him. They like it's just not in their ultimate agenda. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I don't think we're going to.
Teams prefer linemen way more than people like us do. Mm-hmm. Like, and so that's also an omen for receiver as well. Like Rome Odunze is not going to go as high as you think. And if you look at the history of like Jerry Jeudy, we just talked about him. Jerry Jeudy was being mocked top 15, top 10. And in his draft, he went like much back half of the first round. These teams prefer to build in the trenches in the draft. It always happens way more than you think. And Rob said it perfectly. The last quarterback that you think is going to get drafted high always falls every single time. If you look at the history of the markets, in 2018, the index was 5.5 quarterbacks. When Lamar Jackson was taken at 32, over bettors were sweating Mason Rudolph in round 1. It is always an absurd notion of how many guys are going to be going in round 1 for the quarterback position.
Yeah, and also I just feel like there's just general steam. Like last year, everyone was talking about how great the wide receiver class was supposed to be, how many wide receivers are going to go in the first round, and then what happened? Wide receivers were not going as much as you expected in the first round. But Hitman, any final thoughts on this draft before we wrap up?
I don't got I'm just in wait and see mode. Like a lot of the best information that comes out is still hasn't been revealed yet. So honestly, like if I was betting right now, which I haven't made one draft bet, but if I was, I would focus on some more long shots. I agree with Eric that I'm not laying minus money on anything other than Caleb Williams to go first. I just think that everybody should be more in wait and see mode or long shot mode right now.
And just to put everything in perspective, like pro days are still going on as we speak. So it's not like we even have a full understanding of what is happening in these markets. And the teams themselves in some situations probably don't even have a full understanding of what exactly they're going to do on draft night. But that's going to wrap it up for our first edition of the offseason Forward Progress Show. We'll be back same time, same place next Wednesday. I want to remind everybody that if you like the content, pushing that like and subscribe button and sharing the content on socials are the best way to help us out. On behalf of Eric, Rob, Hitman, and myself from the Hammer Betting Network, we appreciate all of you. We'll see you guys next time.